Hey guys, it's Matthew here once again, and I wanted to take you through the first couple of days of the Bestiary League for me, basically what character I picked, what I did, and an update about it, and it is the Champion Dual Striker. So as you can see, I started out as the Duelist. I wore a Pokemon getup because, well, it kind of made sense for this league. I started out with Molten Strike early on and some Ancestral Call action. As soon as I could get Melee Splash, I jumped straight into Dual Strike, as you can see here. That is Dual Strike attached to Ancestral Call and Melee Splash, and I let that do the talking for the next 80 levels, I guess. There are plenty of other skills you can try out, as I mentioned, and lots of different ones you can play, but as I said, I was committing to Dual Strike for the most part right from level 1. Now, as you can see here, I do turn on Righteous Fire occasionally, and that is because I picked up the Adrenaline node from the Champion Ascendancy. I wanted to try it out and put it to the test and see exactly what it can do. So long story short, every time you get to low life, as soon as you actually hit low life, you get the 20-second adrenaline buff. And early on, when you have almost no damage scaling, it feels really good. It's like twice my damage. So proccing that with Righteous Fire, as soon as you get down to a certain amount of health, low life, it will then turn off automatically and you heal back up to full with your regen flask and then get back in there. Though at this stage, this character is something like level 80, you can see is now mapping and all that. I was starting to run a Blasphemy Curse with Blood Magic attached to it. So that would reserve about 70 or 80% life every time I press it. And then, as you can see, I just press a life flask to top myself back up to full instantly. And that gives me 100% damage and 25% attack speed whenever I want it for 20 seconds. I don't think it's strictly necessary for mapping, but the worse your gear is, the better it's going to feel having that extra boost. And I think the Champion itself is a really strong ascendancy right now and really good overall, even without Adrenaline. So you don't have to do the Adrenaline shenanigans, but if you want to min-max your character like I do, then you definitely have to learn to play around the Adrenaline by stopping every now and again, popping your Adrenaline, healing, and then getting back in there, because that attack speed, that damage does feel really good. But as I mentioned, Champion is actually just really good right now, I think, without it. You have the Taunt, the 20% extra damage onto monsters that they then take, the Intimidate from the Adrenaline, the attack speed and damage from the Fortified node, and all of the extra tankiness from that Fortified node. Overall, I think Champion's probably going to be the strongest melee ascendancy at the moment, and this character right now is Dual Strike, and it was working okay. It's not too bad, but as I mentioned before, the character does progress into a Reeve and Blade Flurry in its end game if you really want to min-max the character, and that's probably what I'm going to end up doing. At this stage of the character, I am now Blade Flurrying just to try it out for a few levels, and then I probably transition into Reeve when I have the right gear, the right attack speed, the right damage, because Reeve definitely cannot be competed with for area and clear speed, and Blade Flurry cannot really be competed with for single target. So this is Blade Flurry here, and basically Dual Strike is an in-between. It's a good bridging gap, it's a good leveling skill because you get a threshold, and it feels really good for your area and your single target, but it never feels the best for either one of them. So then you pop in a Blade Flurry and a Reeve, and you start getting your real endgame setup going. But like I said, can do plenty of other skills, so I do encourage you guys to try them out. Some people have gone and gravitated towards Cleave. Some people want to do Frostblades and Molten Strike and all that. I think Champion is very versatile. Now in this clip you can see I have Blade Flurry throughout a map, and these little explosions are coming from Herald of Ice with the Sin Herald effect. So it's just basically similar to a Gore Herald of Ice, but with Sin Herald of Ice now. It's pretty crazy. I don't actually run Herald of Ice typically throughout the build right now, but it is fun to watch and changes the dynamic of the build completely. So I'll go ahead and show you guys where my character's at right now, what it's taken to get this far, and talk a bit about Champion in case you're following along with the build that I've started as my first starter character. So my guy has currently hit level 83. It is a Champion, as I mentioned. It's taken me how long to get here now? 22 hours. It's been pretty casual. I have played around with microtransactions quite a lot recently, but as I mentioned, it is a dual sword character. It was dual striking and still can, but for the past level or two I've been Blade Flurrying, and it means I'm using two swords, which currently is a Skaver in my main hand since it gets additional crit, and I managed to get a prophecy for a Dreadbeak, and I've been offhanding that. If you're going to Blade Flurry or Reeve like I'm going to, then you don't need a real secondary offhand. You get a stat stick just for some bonus random damage and stuff. But if you're going to dual strike like I have been for most of the time, then it's 2 decent weapons. A Skaver plus something else seems pretty nice at this stage. Skaver like this cost me 4 or 5 chaos, and this got a prophecy 4. But the faster the better, so bear in mind if you're going to run Skavers or things like that and you have no attack speed, it's going to feel pretty bad unless you fill out attack speed everywhere else, everywhere that you can. So that does factor a lot into the enjoyment of the build if you can get lots of attack speed. So the faster the weapon, the better it's going to feel. And at this stage, I am just Blade Flurrying and will be Reaving as well. And like I said, Adrenaline feels really good. So this is what I took as my first Ascendancy. You don't have to though. You can go the real defensive, unstoppable hero. You can start working towards the Taunt so that by the time you get Cruel Lab, you get a huge boost in the 20% damage and a 100% chance to hit. But I went with this first and played around with it. So you can see that your hits permanently intimidate when they're on full life. So your first hit is always going to intimidate an enemy, which means they take 10% damage. So that's a pretty nice little boost. But then you get a 20-second buff every time you reach low life. So it's not just being on low life. It's not going to refresh itself. It's the act of hitting 36 to 35% life that will then give you the buff. So the way I've been doing it, as I mentioned, is a Poacher's Mark attached to Blood Magic and Blasphemy. Any curse will do, but it's got to be Blasphemy attached to Blood Magic. And the reason behind this is because a Blasphemy seems to trigger a lot quicker than an Aura. So if you have Blood Magic attached to Discipline, for example, to save a link, it takes a bit of a second to cast that, whereas the Blasphemy is really instant. So you're just running around, you press that, you turn it off, boom. We have a 20-second Adrenaline buff, attack speed, movement speed, damage, physical damage reduction. Shit's insane. So it gives me a huge damage buff for the attack speed and the damage itself, and I've been running a 25% reduced amount recovered, but instant recovery when on low life flask. So this thing has been keeping me up pretty easily, pretty instantly. Every time I have, almost no life, boom, easy, instant access to full life. As well as that, I've been running one of these, an Eternal Life Flask, 100% increased recovery when on low life. Pretty similar effect, so turn it off, turn it on, and it boosts you up pretty damn quickly. I'll probably only end up running one of these flasks in the end, so I can get some good offensive flasks in, but for now, this is my flask setup for a Silver Flask, Diamond Flask, and a Stibnite, just casually. And the gear is fairly modest. It's really nothing special. For the most part, solo self-found, I bought a Star Conjure and a chest to 5 link. This chest was 2 chaos. Star Conjure is about 10 chaos. Everything else is worthless, basically. But the current setup that I was running for Dual Strike was Dual Strike, Ancestral Call, Melee Physical. I then did, I think, Maim for the most part, and Multi-Strike, which you only really get at something like 50, 60 maybe. Up until then, I'm just running around without Multi-Strike, one-shotting things, and that felt totally fine. And you run Melee Splash until you get, the Threshold Jewel over here. As soon as you can do that, just shove it somewhere on your tree that gets 40 dexterity inside the radius. Don't have to have it allocated. And then you don't need Melee Splash in your setup, and you get a bit more single target damage. So it does feel pretty decent once you get the jewel, because you can then drop a link and add some more damage. And currently for the Blade Flurry that I'm now doing, I am playing with Maim, Melee Fizz, added fire, and chance to bleed, but I don't yet have the full setup for that. There's stuff to play around with. Basically, I'm only really using chance to bleed because the weaker your weapons are, the better the flat fizz is going to be. So if you have really fast weapons with really shitty damage, chance to bleed at level 19 or 20 is going to be better than, say, Ruthless or maybe even Maim. So keep that in mind. Now, besides that, I am also currently running an Ancestral War Chief with Melee Fizz, Maim, and faster attacks. If you're going to run Blade, Flurry, or Reeve without an offhand, without a real offhand, then you do have to probably not use War Chief that much, because he alternates attacking, and he's going to attack with a shitty weapon. But for now, he does some decent damage and helps out with our clear speed. Otherwise, Leap Slam, Blood Magic, Fortify, and faster attacks. So you're either using Leap Slam or Whirling Blades, and I kind of like Leap Slam a bit more when you get a lot of attack speed, but you do have to have Fortify attached to it so that you can proc your Unstoppable Hero. Gives you a lot of extra defense and makes you pretty damn tanky with a fortifier, with all that defense. So currently I'm almost rocking something like 10k armor and evasion, as well as a stibnet, as well as fortify, and I will get a little bit tankier. And the only other thing I think I have to mention is I'm running Hatred and then Herald of Ash. Herald of Ash is definitely a bigger damage source than Herald of Ice, especially if you're pure Fizz like we are. And that's probably about it for now, I guess. I will just go over the passive tree. So when I started, I went down this way, through here. I then grabbed this over here. I then went to, well, I wanted to go to the left, but I started to need dexterity. So I went to the right and filled out a bit of life, and started to get the generic damage nodes. Because early on, I wasn't really going swords. I didn't know what I could use or what things I could find. You get generic damage nodes like this one over here, then started going over here for some life and some generic crit down here. Once I actually picked up swords and committed to them, I started to take the sword nodes. So with the Belly of the Beast, with all the allocated nodes, I should hit 5.5k life. Could even go for 6k if I really need to, but with the amount of defense I'm going to have and the damage, the way I kill things quickly, I think it should be enough. So for now, that's probably all I need to say about the character. I do want to go over these microtransactions in case you're interested really quickly. So they did release the new mystery box over here for 30 points. I bought, let's say, 1,800 points worth from previous supporter packs that I had points left over with. And I got a shitload of doubles, but by the first 1,000 points or so, I did have most of what I wanted. Now that includes the Sin and Innocence combined wings. So if you get each of the wings, let's say Innocence wings and then Sin ones, you can combine them to Sin and Innocence wings. And I think they're the best micro in the game at the moment. They just look really nice. You can then combine every other piece of armor too for Sin and Innocence, but I haven't really done that for the most part. Do have a Sin and Innocence sword as well, which is this thing, and Sin and Innocence sword pets. As you can see, they randomly stab the ground sometimes. This guy's going in, boom. But yeah, it's a really cool supporter pack. It's not supporter pack, sorry, micro box. I don't really believe in them. I think they do feel pretty bad, but you know, I don't feel terribly bad supporting GGG and getting some pretty shit for my character because, well, that's the real end game for me, going for the looks. So it was pretty fun getting all these boxes, and I think this box is currently the best one out there. If you want to buy it, go right ahead. If you don't, I completely understand it's a shitty system and it doesn't feel very fun most of the time. There is also this hideout decoration here, and you can get some crappy pets that fly around. So, you know, take that for what it's worth. For now though guys, that's the setup, that's my champion. If I take it further, which I'm hoping to, I will have an update again for the pure endgame, but for now, that's all I've got though. Hope your league start has been good, hope you're enjoying it. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.